Hello and welcome to the fifth and final podcast in our Lent series from St. John the Divine, Kennington, on exploring prayer. I'm Father Seb, one of the assistant priests here, and also chaplain to our parish secondary school, St. Gabriel's College. You are very welcome however and whenever you are joining us. Today we are going to explore silent prayer, or what can also be called contemplative prayer, or Christian meditation. Silent prayer is a form of prayer that has a rich history in the Christian tradition, but sadly it's still not that well known, and it can remain somewhat hidden. Spending time in silence is something that many, if not most of us as humans, can initially be afraid of, or something that we actively seem to avoid. But the Christian tradition has much to teach us and encourage us about spending time in silent prayer. There are numerous instances in the Psalms that speak of silence, such as Psalm 62, where we hear the psalmist write, "For God alone my soul waits in silence," or Psalm 4, where the psalmist says, "Commune with the Lord in silence and be still." And there's a very well-known phrase in Psalm 46, which says, "Be still and know that I am God." Elsewhere in the Old Testament, we hear that when Elijah is waiting for God, he discovers that God is not in the wind or the earthquake or the fire, but in the sound of sheer silence. And in the New Testament, we see that Jesus often goes off by himself alone to pray, away from the noises and the distractions of the crowds. And later on in the New Testament, we hear that St. Paul talks of prayer as something that cannot be put into words. In the 16th century, a Spanish friar called St. John of the Cross said, "Our greatest need is to be silent before this great God, for the only language he hears is the silent language of love." Silence is not the absence of noises or sounds. It's a state of awareness in which we can find some stillness, some peace of heart, and know that we are held by God's love. God is always working silently within us, and so silent prayer at its simplest is merely sitting before God and giving our attention to God and to God's work within us. Silent prayer can often be called the prayer of the heart, and this differentiates it from discursive forms of prayer which tend to make the mind quite active. But because of the nature of our human mind, in this prayer of the heart, we tend to need something that can help us bring us back to the place of the heart and give us a focus. Thus, the Christian tradition offers a number of forms of silent prayer, and these forms can help dispel some of the fears that we might have about silence, because they give us this anchor, this focus, and they also help us to discover that in silence we can find much fruit in our prayer lives. One form of prayer could merely be gazing at the Blessed Sacrament, or at a crucifix, or at a painting or icon, or at a tree or a flower. But there are also a number of forms of silent prayer that involve using a short phrase or prayer word that can help focus our attention, and I shall briefly talk about some of these now. With any form of silent prayer, first of all it's important to find that foundation which comes through our posture. This means finding a posture that is both comfortable and allows us to find some stillness in our bodies, but also allows us to remain alert. First of all, I shall talk about the Jesus prayer, a prayer that comes from the Orthodox Church. This encourages the use of a variation of this short phrase, "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner." And this phrase is said while we pay attention to our in-breath and our out-breath, and we try and align the two. Another form of prayer, Christian meditation, that was taught by the Benedictine monk John Main, who founded the World Community of Christian Meditation, encourages the use of a mantra, possibly the Aramaic word Maranatha, meaning "Come, Lord Jesus." And in this form of prayer, you use the word repeatedly and align the syllables of the mantra with each in-breath and out-breath. Another form of prayer, called centering prayer, is a prayer that is based on a medieval book by an anonymous author called The Cloud of Unknowing, and was then developed in the 20th century by a Trappist monk called Father Thomas Keating. This form of prayer encourages us to choose a short phrase or a word, such as Jesus or peace or love, and we make this our sacred word. We do not use the word repeatedly throughout our prayer. Instead, we gently introduce the word at the start of our prayer, and then return to the word when we notice that our mind has wandered or have become distracted. Thoughts and distractions are an inevitable part of prayer, and these practices of silent prayer help us know what to do with these. Most of them speak of watching our thoughts pass by, rather like watching the clouds float by in the sky, or a river flowing gently past us. We don't engage with them, and in silent prayer we try not to resist our thoughts, or react to them, or cling to them, but instead keep coming gently back to God and to that awareness of God's presence. Another important thing to be aware of with any form of silent prayer is that we are not trying to achieve anything or to manufacture or conjure up a spiritual experience, and indeed we are not trying to concentrate our mind in the form of a mental process. Instead, we are merely trying to bring ourselves back to God with an awareness of God's presence. Silent prayer is something that we can do on our own or with other people, but it can be helpful to have the support of a group. And there are many groups that practice silent prayer around that you can join and find support from. Thank you for joining us for this series of podcasts from St John the Divine Kennington in Lent. I shall close with some words by the Anglican priest, Father Gilbert Shaw. Be silent, still, and aware, for there in your heart the Spirit is at prayer. Open and find heart wisdom. Christ. God bless you, and may you have a blessed Passiontide and Holy Week and Easter.